Welcome to Actual Scale Modelling for my next build. I'm building this Airfix Bedford QLT and Bedford QLD trucks. So there's two in the kit and the scale is 176. So again, this is going to be part of my 176 series, also for a diorama that I've got in mind. So in the box, we have a small decal sheet for both trucks. We have the instructions and replacement sheet for decals and colour guide for both trucks. So in the instructions, it will be a basic affair, I would imagine. Yeah. So I'll be building these simultaneously, and I'm going to build one then one to the other, because both of them are basically the same. Kit itself, this one does actually come with windows, unlike the Matador, so that's good. And the sprues look nice and clean. Yeah, that was very good moulding on this one. Can't see any flash. So I'll go and get them primed and we'll get into the build. Start off with painting on the sprue as normal. I'm going to be painting the inside here, and this is Umbral 401 Dirty Black. And because this is two trucks, they're basically the same, apart from one or two little differences. So first of all, I'm going to be joining the gearbox. I will flash up the QLD or QLT depending on which kit I'm doing at a particular time. And then it's on to starting the drivetrain. As you can see, I've already started the QLT, and that's marked with a little T on a bit of masking tape. When you put it in the drive shaft here, just make sure that it goes in the right hole on the gearbox. There's 3 holes in total, one on one side and 2 on the other. Make sure this goes onto the bottom placement. Next to go on is front crossbar that's going to be going directly underneath the radiator. Just move my camera a bit so you can see a bit more. And I'll fit in the bracket that goes over the axle, and this is what the main cab sits on. The drivetrain is getting painted in a combination of 56 aluminium and 53 gunmetal. Moving on to the suspension springs, and these are painted in 113 rust, and they just sit over the axles and the engine gearbox, I should say. Make sure you put these on straight, because if you don't, your cab will end up being square. So when you're putting everything on, just make sure it lines up straight. It can be a bit difficult because now that the second drive shaft is gone into the gearbox hole, again, if you haven't got your first one in properly, this is where you'll find out whether it's in straight or not. So it may help just put it against something straight, just to make sure you get everything lined up. And once you've got the axle on, you'll have to manoeuvre the drivetrain and the suspension springs onto the brackets. For the QLD, this is the rack that holds the spare wheel. There's just 2 halves married together. Then you place it on. There's a couple of location points for it to fit into. There's about the midway point, well, just under the midway point. And then it's the fuel tank. Again, it's just 2 halves put together, and that gets placed on the end part where the spare wheel is going to go. So now on the QLT, the brackets here are different from the QLD. So there's 2 of these, one gets placed on each side. I did find you may be wise to fit the spare wheel now before you put the second bracket in. I didn't, and I had to fiddle around trying to get it to fit, because it's quite a tight fit once the brackets go in. So it's something you may want to consider. The QLT has 2 tanks, and they get placed on the already preformed brackets. It's a simple fit. I'm starting on the cab now, and the inside of the cab is 102 Army Green. As you can see, I've already painted the seats in this 83 ochre. The innards of the cab itself is a simple construction. You can see both sets laid out here. First of all, I put the seats on, and then in pops the steering wheel. There's a recess point right at the bottom there. You can't get mixed up where it has to go. Both compartments are the same, so I'm going to be using Tamiya's Withering Master C and the gunmetal component to highlight the instrument dials first of all. I'm then using 34 white matte to paint in the needles at the dial. You don't really have to do this because you can barely see them, but I just wanted to do them. For the radiators, I'm using 53 gunmetal, and that's just for the front grey of it. So it's time to assemble the cab. Each cab is exactly the same apart from the roof, but I'll get around to that. So the first part to go on is the back wall. Next is the front part where the radiator is. And lastly, the two side doors makes up the basic form of the both cabs. So on the QLD, there's the roof has a hole in it. It has a a little collar that goes on top. So that just gets fitted on top of the cab. And I'll place it on all the little lights and things like that that go on the front of the cab. Both cabs again are the same at this point. I should point out they're painted in 30 dark green at the moment. Next is a small canvas roll, and that's painted in 83 ochre, and that just sits at the bottom of the radiator. Onto the bed of the truck now, of the QLD, and each bed is going to be made up slightly different. This is the more plain of the two to be built, so it's just the bed and two side units, and then fitting the two end units. And the inside is painted in 102 Army Green, so it's the same colour as the cab. On one of the discs at the front, it's asking to be 69 yellow. Now this is not really necessary because the decal is actually already yellow anyway, but it depends whether you want to paint it or not. For the second bed, this is actually seats we're having to build here. So there's a central column first of all, and there's two side parts that go in that form the seat. On the actual bed itself, there's a central column that goes in. I've already placed that in without filming it. I do apologise. For the bottom of the seats, everything is getting painted in the 102 Army Green colour. And that's just for the bottom, not for the seats themselves. The seats are getting painted in 83 ochre. And then the seat gets placed in the middle of the bed. It just pushes on. The fit's really nice. It's nice and tight. You won't have to worry about holding it into position or anything like that. Next is to put the two sidewalls in. Now it's important to line up these ridges with each other. So make sure you have the correct side going on at this point, because this will be forming part of the canvas bed as well. And then it's the side panels going in. This particular note, this side panel here does have an upright beam. That is for the strut to hold up the canvas. On the bottom of the truck bed, this is the same for each. There's a series of little blocks and obviously the mud guards going on. It's just a couple of little boxes that you place on. As you can see, the location points are well defined. So I'm now going on to the top part of the trailer bed here, and these are the canvas parts. It's easy enough to make up, just same sort of way as the actual bed itself. The trailer that's got the seats does have a couple of foot plates that you have to place in, and these are painted in Umbro 56 aluminium. It's up to you whether you want to paint them green or not, but I thought I'd just paint them in aluminium. So now it's time for the next top, and the sidewalls for this are two thin struts that go along. So it's completely different from the QLD. It does have the support, the beam, the struts coming down as well. Be careful you don't bend any of these. When you're fitting the end piece as well, keep in mind these two sidewalls here will jut into the actual beam. There's a little groove cut out on the end piece for it to do this, but when you're cutting them off the sprue, make sure you're not cutting that part off or you'll end up having to fill it. I'm using the Canopy Glue here to place in the windows. Now they're exactly the same on each cab. These windows are a bit chunky though. They stick out a lot more than I would have liked. The instructions do tell you to put them on the outside, but they don't look right to me. Onto the tyres, and it's life colour UA734 Warden Black for the actual tyre itself. The tyre assembly is quite simple. It's just a little hubcap that gets pushed into the centre. It's now time to fit the cab, and there's a couple of little location points for it to fit. There's a solid bar at the bottom of the cab that corresponds to its opposite number, and there's two little points just on the suspension springs that it fits onto. I'm now using 102 Army Green for the camouflage, and the camouflage is mainly on the bottom and the top of the actual truck. Both canvas tops are getting 30 dark green. That's going to be the underlying colour, as you can see, that and the 102 Army Green. I'm fitting the spare wheel. There's a little location point for the wheel bracket to go into. And when you're fitting the actual bed itself, it slides in between the actual spare wheel bracket that I put on earlier. This is where you find out whether you have got the positioning done correctly. As you see, it should just slot in without any fuss. Next to go on is the actual wheels. Now these front wheels do have the flat tired look, as in weight onto it, so make sure they go at the bottom. The location point and resistance points for these are in such a way that you should be alright, but it's only the front tires that have this, not the back tires, so just make sure that you're putting the right ones on. So now onto the exhaust, and this is painted in the 56 aluminium colour. It's the same for both trucks there. For the bicycle, I'm just painting it in random colours that I have. I wasn't sure which colours to paint, so I'm not going to list them, but they're basically the greens that I used on the actual build. So it's time to place in the exhaust. The position on each exhaust is practically the same. They can be a little bit tight to get in, but just persevere with it. Now it's time to put on the canvas top. There's a little groove there that the end just fits into. That helps get you to line it up properly. On the QLT bed, it's slightly different because the canvas is open. There's a couple of little location points at the back initially to help line it up, and then you line up the struts with the paneling on the side components. There shouldn't be any issues finding the correct position for the bed, for the trailer bed. It should just bump up against the cab. So next is the spare wheel. As you can see, I've already put in place. I was a little bit tight to put it in. I had to wiggle the bracket about quite a bit to get it in. But once it's in, the top bracket just goes over the top here. And then lastly, it's at the end, it's the two panel doors that go on the end of the bed. There's a little machine gun that you can fit on top of the truck here. One of the support beams starts up so that you can just place it on. So as you can see, I'm putting on the decals. I fast forward it a bit because there's not much to show you. There's very few decals to put on actually. Just mostly the registration marks and the insignias. But they went on in the normal way. Applied, softened them with some water, apply some solution, and then placed them on. Well, that brings the build to an end. Slightly longer build video than normal. It's because of the two trucks. Didn't really want to split the video in two on this occasion. If you haven't done so already, why don't you check out the videos on my channel, indeed for the 176 series. Subscribe to that channel for the updates, hit that like button, and of course leave a comment. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.